So the year is 1517, and the Protestant Reformation is about to begin. Now, when you look at the word reformation, you may say, what does that mean? Well, if you look at it closely, you can see the word reform. When you think of reforming, you may think of reforming the way you shoot a basketball or reforming the way you throw a baseball. Every time I shoot a basketball, I normally miss, so I tend to, say, I need to reform the way I shoot that thing. Well, the Protestant Reformation referred to the reforming of the way religion was practiced. So you see Reformation, you see this big T here. Draw that big T, think of a cross. Think of reforming the way religion is practiced. So in the year 1517, we have Martin Luther, our famous German monk, who says, the Catholic Church is telling a lot of things that just are not true. For example, the Catholic Church used to make citizens pay for indulgences. An indulgence was the church's way of forgiving someone for their sins. But in order to be granted an indulgence, you had to pay money to the Catholic Church. And Martin Luther said that's preposterous. That should not be the way religion is practiced. So he begins to preach throughout Europe, preaching for people to depart ways with the Catholic Church and to still practice and hold on to religion, but think of it differently. You shouldn't have to have the Roman Catholic Church down here in Rome to tell you how to practice your life. So this is where King Henry VIII comes into play. Henry VIII was born down here in 1491 to who was then the King and Queen of England. He had an older brother, Arthur, however, who was in line to become the next king, but he died. Hence why I do not have a picture for him. He's really not that important. King Henry VIII, then, was married to Catherine of Aragon. Now, Catherine of Aragon is originally from Spain. Aragon's a region kind of down here. But she was married to King Henry VIII. And for a long time, they were in love. They were really a great king and queen for a long time, and unfortunately, a few things happened and they fell out of love. So Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon did have several children, but none of whom were boys. They had all girls. And King Henry VIII, it's not popular to have a male queen at the time. He wanted a male heir. Poor Catherine of Aragon, it really wasn't her fault. She tried to give him a male son, but she couldn't, so eventually she and King Henry VIII fall out of love, and that's when Anne Boleyn comes into play. So she's just this daughter of a wealthy noble family, and she's a pretty good-looking girl. You can clearly tell, and King Henry VIII says, "Hey, Anne Boleyn, you're pretty good-looking." "Oh, thanks, Henry." So, they fall in love. Catherine of Aragon's kind of out of the picture here. And so King Henry VIII says, "I'm going to marry you, Anne Boleyn. You're going to give me a male heir to the throne." And Anne Boleyn says, "Okay, let's do it." Well, Pope Clemente VII down here in Rome, he's the only person that can grant King Henry VIII a divorce. Because remember, England is a Roman Catholic country at the time. You need the Pope's permission to be granted a divorce. And he says, "I'm not going to allow that, King Henry VIII. I will not allow you and Anne Boleyn to get married." So he kind of, kicks Anne Boleyn out of the picture here. And King Henry VIII says, "That's not fair." Pope Clemente says, "Too bad, I'm the Pope." So this is where Martin Luther comes into play. Martin Luther is preaching against these doctrines that the Roman Catholic Church is practicing. And King Henry VIII listens, and he says, Martin Luther, maybe you're right. Maybe England should separate from Roman Catholic rule. So then, in the year 1531, King Henry VIII, along with the support of his parliament, passes the Act of Succession. This meant that the state of England would be separate from the rule of the Roman Catholic Church. Basically, England didn't have to listen to what Rome was saying. This being done, King Henry VIII was free to marry Anne Boleyn. Poor Catherine of Aragon, she was divorced and out of the picture. So, this was the first time that a country had stood up to the rule of Rome and said, we're not going to listen to what you say. This really began to ignite the Protestant Reformation, and it followed. People began to listen and see what King Henry VIII did, and then the Roman Catholic rule steadily began to lose some of its power, and then down in Rome they had to reevaluate what they were doing. King Henry VIII, he was a really Catholic guy. He was once titled the Defender of the Faith because he stood up for the Roman Catholic Church. But when he wasn't able to marry the woman he loved, he declared himself separate, and thus launching the Protestant Reformation. So, just because one guy wasn't able to marry the woman he loved, history was changed. So King Henry VIII, quite an interesting reign. He ended up marrying about 8 more times. You're an interesting guy, King Henry. Alright guys, that's all.